know that at the Many people know that at the ASEAN summit held in Jakarta, Indonesia not long ago, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken mentioned the South China Sea arbitration. In this context, China firmly denies it. Chinese Representative Wang Yishan directly stated that China has never agreed to the South China Sea arbitration case, and the case has been resolved by the National Court from beginning to end. It must be emphasized that the conspiracy of the United States finally went bankrupt under China's strong counterattack. What is even more unacceptable to the United States is that through China's continuous efforts, China and ASEAN have reached a consensus and decided to withdraw in 2026. Sign the South China Sea Code of Conduct in autumn to fundamentally improve the sovereignty of the South China Sea. It was thought that after the bankruptcy of the U.S. conspiracy in the South China Sea, it would subside for a while, but no one expected that the U.S. would join hands with Japan to plan a East China Sea arbitration case and want to attack the Diaoyu Islands owned by China. According to reports, 2 Chinese Coast Guard ships sailed near the Diaoyu Islands. The Japanese security agency sent a patrol ship to call the Chinese law enforcement ship and asked us to leave. Faced with the expulsion of the Japanese patrol boats, our country did not land, but directly expelled the Japanese fishing boats, without giving Japan any face. Due to the large gap between Chinese and Japanese ships, facing the expulsion of the Chinese side, the Japanese patrol boats could only leave the Chinese waters in shame. In addition, the Japanese fishing boats sneaked into the waters around the Diaoyu Islands while the Chinese Coast Guard boats were not paying attention. If we hadn't discovered it in time, then don't even think about it, this Japanese fishing boat would have landed on the Diaoyu Islands secretly. It is worth noting that the reason why we are so tough is because we have absolute sovereignty over the Diaoyu Islands. As a defeated country in World War II, Japan has no chance to criticize China at all. At this time, we must not only remain vigilant against Japan's forced assessment of the Diaoyu Islands, but also carry out a strong blow to Japan in the field of public opinion. After all, the South China Sea arbitration case is enough to give China a headache, and if there is another East China Sea arbitration case, it will be difficult for us not to attack Japan. In fact, China's approach to the Ryukyu Islands is enough to make Japan drink pot. Japan sees the territory as the last baseline and does not want the independence of its trusty Ryukyu Islands. In this case, before the situation in China changes, Japan will definitely focus on its own problems. Frankly speaking, if Japan dares to attack our Diaoyu Islands, we dare to independently support the Ryukyu Islands controlled by Japan. For many friends, the reserve force is always a very strange existence, and they are very accustomed to talking about militia and reserve together, but they seldom distinguish the difference between the two. Therefore, it is necessary for us to first talk about what is a reserve force. The reserve force is an armed force composed of active servicemen as the backbone, reserve officers and soldiers as the basis, and demobilized veterans as the main component. It is organized in accordance with the unified system of the Army. It is an integral part of the Chinese People's Liberation Army and the focus of National Defense Reserve Forces. The reserve force conducts training in accordance with the regulations at ordinary times, and can assist in maintaining social order in accordance with the law when necessary. In wartime, it is transferred to the active duty force according to the mobilization order issued by the state. A reserve force's training. The reserve service belongs to the organizational sequence of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, but it is not an active duty force, and it is also different from the militia. The reserve force was originally under the dual leadership of the military and the local government, but it is currently under the centralized and unified leadership of the party's Central Committee and the Central Military Commission. Our country's reserve force was established in March 1983. It is divided into services and arms reserve divisions and regiments. It is included in the organizational sequence of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, awarded military flags and designations, and implements the regulations of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. In 1983, the People's Liberation Army Reserve Force was awarded the military flag. Since then, many Army divisions with glorious traditions have been transferred to the Reserve Force in the reform and adjustment. The basic tasks originally identified were: efforts should be made to improve the military and political quality of the troops, and continuously enhance the rapid mobilization and combat capabilities under modern conditions. Do a good job in all preparations for wartime mobilization, and be ready to transfer to active duty troops at any time to perform combat tasks. Actively participate in socialist construction and play a leading role in the construction of material civilization and spiritual civilization. Reserve divisions and regiments are organized in a unified manner, usually organized by region, composed of reserve officers and soldiers, equipped with a certain number of active servicemen as the backbone, and have a capable division and regiment organization responsible for organizational planning, training, and weaponry management. Today, the Reserve Force has officially started an extremely significant reform. Back to this evening's big news. The Reserve Force will be incorporated into the Military Leadership Command System next month. In fact, the editor can understand the phrase "it's finally here" that the Reserve Comrade in Arms said. As a member of the Reserve Force, this Comrade in Arms should have been waiting for this reform for a long time. During this period, they actively or passively accepted how much gossip about where the Reserve Force is going, and how much anxiety, confusion, and worry they caused. Perhaps only they themselves know best. After all, according to official information, the adjustment and reform of the Reserve Forces can be described as long in the making. Since May 2018, a Reserve Force adjustment and reform suggestion box has been opened on the Kiangjun website within the Army. Therefore, even if counted since then, the feeling of unresolved suffering and anxiety of the reserve comrades has lasted for more than 2 years. Tonight, when the dust has settled, I have to say to the comrades in the reserves, thank you for your hard work. It is worth mentioning that, perhaps because of the military uniform, many friends think that the reserve forces are Army reserves. The fact is that as early as 2005, the reserve forces of the Navy and Air Force were formed one after another. In 2005, the Naval Reserve was formed. It is mainly composed of the Reserve Reconnaissance Ship Brigade, Reserve Minesweeper Brigade. The Reserve Mobile Radar Guantong Battalion is composed. In 2005, the Air Force created its first Reserve Surface-to-Air Missile Unit. And looking back at this important moment tonight, you can feel that the Reserve Phalanx in the 2019 National Day Military Parade is really extraordinary. On October 1, 2019, among the 15 parade teams on foot, one with the most colorful colors was inspected by the motherland and the people. It is Reserve Phalanx. It is composed of members of the reserve forces of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Rocket Force, and Strategic Support Force, dressed in different military uniforms. The sentence "this is the first time that the reserve forces have been reviewed in the form of a joint formation of all services and arms" is really too important. At that time, seeing such a scene being read, one thought that came to my mind was, today, the reserve troops and active duty troops of various services and arms appeared on the parade ground together. In the future, the reserve forces are destined to win the battle with the active forces. Finally, a word about tonight's big news itself. There are at least 3 dry goods. 1. The name of the Reserve Army can be corrected. According to the news report, the Reserve Force is fully integrated into the military leadership and command system. The position of the Reserve Force is clarified. The Reserve Force is a part of the People's Liberation Army. This adjustment of the leadership system is an expression of adjusting the leadership system of the Reserve Forces according to the principle that the Army is the Army, the police is the police, and the people are the people. The status and role of the Reserve Forces will be more prominent and incorporated into the command system. The purpose is to realize the party's goal of strengthening the military in the new era and build the People's Army into a world-class army in an all-round way. Second, local leaders no longer work part-time. According to the statement in the report that the current dual leadership of the military and the local government has been adjusted to the centralized and unified leadership of the party's Central Committee and the Central Military Commission, the practice of local leaders concurrently serving as reserve forces will become history. For example, according to previous reports, Chen Gang, secretary of the Guiyang Municipal Party Committee, served as the first political commissar of the Guizhou Reserve Infantry Division. I believe that this will no longer happen in the future. 3. The future preparations are real preparations. This time, reaffirmation is a statement that is an important component, illustrating its importance. Frankly speaking, the previous reserve forces did not have too much combat effectiveness, and even the equipment was old-fashioned old guys. Now that they have been included in the command system, it is impossible to assign such old guys. Otherwise, what can they be expected to do? I believe that the future must be young and fine. Similarly, retiring so many experienced and skilled personnel and transferring them to the reserve force every year is also a fortune. At this moment, the reform curtain of the reserve force has been opened, and it seems that it is really a big move. We look forward to a first-class reserve force, and we look forward to a first-class People's Army. In short, there are reasons to believe that with this adjustment, the future of the reserve team can be expected. At the same time, We also wish the comrades in arms of the reserve forces a brighter future. After retiring from the military, what are the regulations for serving in the reserve service? According to the Military Service Law of the People's Republic of China, the Law of the People's Republic of China on reserve officers and other relevant regulations, except for officers and soldiers who have met the retirement requirements and retired from active service due to injuries, illnesses, and disabilities, and other reasons are no longer suitable for reserve service. Other cadres, non-commissioned officers, and conscripts who have retired from active service are generally transferred to reserve service. Officers and soldiers who meet the conditions for transfer to reserve service are ordered to transfer to reserve service when the troops issue an order to retire from active service. The granting of reserve service ranks is generally based on the following principles. For officers and civilian cadres transferred to the officer reserve service, their reserve service officer ranks shall be determined according to their former active service officer ranks or civilian cadre levels. Officers who are approved to retire from active service and transfer to officer reserve service, whose rank has expired for promotion and meet the prescribed conditions, may have a reserve officer rank that is one level higher than their original active service officer rank. For example, if a cadre of a certain department has completed the rank of major for 4 years before March 31st of the year when he transferred to the reserve service, when his superiors issue an order to transfer to the reserve service, he can be awarded the rank of lieutenant colonel in the reserve service. For conscripts and non-commissioned officers transferred to the soldiers' reserve service, under normal circumstances, the rank of corporal in the reserve is awarded to the senior soldier, the rank of sergeant is awarded to the corporal, and so on. Of course, special circumstances are excluded. For example, if a sergeant retires from active service after 2 years of service, he can only be awarded the rank of reserve sergeant. For the granting of reserve service ranks, the Political Work Department at or above the regiment level of the Army should put forward opinions on transferring to the officer, soldier, reserve service, and the determination of the rank of the officer, soldier, shall be handled in accordance with the appointment and removal authority of the corresponding rank of the active duty officer, soldier. Reserve officers who serve in the reserve forces and those who are pre-regimented into the active forces serve as division level, regiment level, battalion level, company level, and platoon level positions. The maximum age for normal reserve service is 55, 50, 45, 40, and 35 years old, respectively. Due to work needs, it can be extended appropriately after approval, but the age of extension shall not exceed 5 years old. The maximum age for reserve professional and technical officers to serve in the reserve service is 60, 55, and 50 years old for senior, intermediate, and junior professional and technical officers, respectively. The age for soldiers in the reserve service is from 18 to 35 years old, and can be appropriately extended as needed. There are 2 main categories of soldier reserves. The first type of soldier reserve includes reserve soldiers who are pre-regimented to the active duty troops, reserve soldiers who are incorporated into the reserve forces, and personnel who have been registered and incorporated into the basic militia organizations. The second category of soldier reserve service includes personnel who have been registered in the reserve service and incorporated into ordinary militia organizations, other personnel who have been registered in the reserve service and are determined to serve in the soldier reserve service, and reserve soldiers who have reached the maximum age for reserve service will be discharged from the reserve service. Reserve officers mainly include officers retired from active service and transferred to reserve service, soldiers discharged from active service confirmed to serve in the officer reserve, graduates of ordinary colleges and universities confirmed to serve in the officer reserve, full-time People's Armed Forces cadres and militia cadres confirmed to serve in the officer reserve, cadres and professional technical personnel of non-military departments confirmed to serve in the officer reserve. The age for soldiers in the reserve service is from 18 to 35 years old, and can be appropriately extended as needed. Subsidies such as food and transportation for reservists participating in military training and performing military duties shall be implemented in accordance with relevant state regulations. If the reservists are staff members or employees of government agencies, groups, enterprises, and public institutions, during the period of participating in military training and performing military duties, their units shall maintain their original wages, bonuses, and welfare benefits. Other reservists participating in military training and performing military duties shall be paid in accordance with relevant state regulations. Reserve personnel must participate in military training and perform military duties in accordance with regulations, and be ready to join the Army at any time to defend the motherland. After the state issues a mobilization order, people's governments at all levels and military agencies at all levels must implement mobilization promptly. Reserve personnel are ready to be called up for active service at any time, and must report to the designated place on time after receiving the notice. After this adjustment, the next step is to revise the law of the People's Republic of China on reserve officers. So far, many transfer friends still have a question, why they have been transferred to the reserves for several years, and they have not organized or trained us, or even have no news at all.